Welcome to Oneness and Wellness. We have a great program today. We're back with Lorraine Goldblum from New York and my old buddy there, Marsha Reddington Lawton, and we're going to be talking about anxiety. So with all the holiday trips, and if you've been out shopping at all, if you've been out even to the food market, it's incredible. The streets are loaded and it can cause a lot of anxiety. So I'm looking forward to it. Lorraine's going to begin with giving you a little bit of an intro into the issues that we've been filming for the past few months.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me back. It's so nice to be here, to see you again. New chairs, the set looks great. You know. And we're lucky enough to have some people who've joined us in the audience, which is, I really appreciate that. It's very, very helpful because we're talking about issues and issues are shared, aren't they?
Exactly.
But let me back up and talk about why we're here. I teach something called vortex healing. It's a healing art. It's a healing modality, and it has a very functional application. It works on issues, physical, psychological, emotional issues, and issues are very complicated. They sit in many places in the physical body, in the energetic system. And one issue sits and expresses in many ways. It's going to have a good issue. It's going to have a physical expression, an emotional expression. You know, it's going to sit all over the place. So vortex healing is a healing modality that's going to address all that on an energetic level, where it sits in the physical body and all of that. But the thing that makes vortex healing unique is that it has a consciousness component, and it's going to go into the core of your issue and address it and how it holds us. And what an issue is, in essence, when I talk about issues, is really an issue, any kind of issue, is anything that keeps you out of being present. I mean, that is my sort of core definition of what an issue is. It keeps you out of the moment. And an example I use is, if I have a physical stomach ache going on, I'm kind of absorbed in an experience of my personal self, aren't I? You know, I'm trying to be here with you, I'm trying to enjoy the moment, but my physical issue in this case keeps me in this particular experience of myself. So to address an issue, any issue properly, you have to get all of those expressions. And when I talk about vortex healing, really, the best way to talk about vortex healing is to offer a demonstration. So usually I'm offering a healing so people can have a direct experience of it. And people appreciate that, and it works. But I find what people are really interested in is where and how it affects issues that affect them. So I've started something that we're calling the issue series. We're sort of, taking different issues that we all share and sort of exploring them. How they're held, where they're held, how they show up in the body, what they look like, how they keep us out of the moment, and then, of course, how to deal with them and bring them back.
And for our viewing audience, we have, in the previous times, we've done money and shame. And so today we'll be doing anxiety. So we're going to do the whole spectrum.
There are plenty of issues.
An anxious moment.
We got material.
All the way
not a
to
problem.
panic. So,
yes, anxiety, it seemed like a no-brainer in terms of issues to talk about, because there's no one I know of who's immune to anxiety on some level.
Absolutely.
And a certain level of anxiety is arguably useful in terms of it gears us towards certain things. But what we're really talking about today is when anxiety becomes a real problem. When it really takes you out of the moment, when you have to manage it, and so many of us have dealt with that in different ways. It's a hard one.
Right, it's a hard one. I know people that have had panic attacks and they're not able to leave their home.
Yeah.
They're not able to go outside of the doors. They're so constricted by that anxiety, which is a disorder.
It is, and anxiety, there's a difference between just anxiety that everyone has and then an anxiety disorder. When I teach my vortex healing classes, and we're talking about different issues, I will ask for a show of hands for people who are brave enough to volunteer. How many people in the room have had a panic attack? About half the people raise their hands. It's far more common than we realize, and it needs to be talked about and addressed. You know, and anxiety. If there's one issue that really represents being kept out of the moment, it's anxiety, because most of what we experience as anxiety is either worrying about what could potentially happen in the future, or trying to process something that has happened in the past. You know, when we're actually in the moment, we are reactive, we're moving, we're living. It's not really anxiety as I'm talking about it today.
Okay.
And one of the other things you talk about, you know, being in the moment,
Yeah.
is that's where we have our power.
Yes.
And so when we're, you know, stuck anywhere but in the moment, of course we get anxious.
Of course we do. Of course we do, because we have no control, you know, over anything, really. And so we try to manage it by coming up with creative ways where we believe that we're in control, only to realize we can't.
Well, look at the culture we live in.
Yeah.
You know, you turn on the television, you walk down the street, you talk to your family members. All reasons to become anxious.
Yeah.
At least my family.
I remember planning my wedding, which was a wonderful wedding, and it went beautifully, and you know, people were wonderful on all sides. But just planning an event like that, you know, it always brings up stuff. And I remember sitting with a friend of mine talking about the planning process, and I was worrying about this and I was anxious about that, and she took a little cocktail napkin and she said, "Let me show you something." And she drew a circle on the cocktail napkin, and I said, "What is that?" She said, "It's the circle of control." She said, "Note that most of reality sits outside of the circle of control, and that's the first thing
Glad you
you
bring
need
that
to
up."
accept if you're going." I was like, I still have that cocktail napkin. I saved that because I thought that was a wonderful little lesson.
Well, it's really interesting because control is part of it too, because I think, I know that I talk to a lot of people and they say the older you get, the more you want to control things.
Yeah.
And we have no control. So I go back to Buddhism and say, listen, live in the moment.
Yeah.
Let go of the, you can't, control is an issue for everybody.
Everybody.
But
yeah.
don't go there.
Yeah.
Could you please speak about the issue of control versus what it is that Vortex helps us arrive at?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Well, vortex healing, it's demonstrated and functions like a healing modality. But what makes it work is that it's really about awakening. And awakening is being in the present moment. It's taking, it's helping you to realize that you are not those issues. You are not that experience, And so what we do is we go after our issues. Vortex healing gives us tools to, let go of this. And as I've talked about in the past, we identify with those issues. We don't just say, oh, I have control affecting my system. We say, I am in control. We don't say, I have anger that's making me cranky. We say, I am angry. So our issues not only condition us, but they create identity.
Right.
And so the tools allow us to let go of the issues. But the core, the nature of vortex healing, it allows us to wake up out of the story of who we think we are. And that always brings us back to the present moment.
For me, one of the things about Vortex that has really blessed my life is that issues for me is like quicksand. And if it's a really good issue, it's quicksand with super glue.
Yeah, yeah.
And that what Vortex has really blessed my life to do is that it not only takes me out of the quicksand,
Yeah.
what happens is it clears the quicksand around me. It gives me room. I'm no longer stuck and defined by it. I can experience it,
Yeah.
but not be defined by it.
Yeah.
And that Vortex, to have that power of a healing tool
Yeah.
that shifts me on every level of all my bodies and brings me to a higher mind, a higher perspective, is humbling
Yeah, absolutely.
because it's so powerfully freeing.
Yeah, yeah. It was my path to freedom. It was my path to freedom. And, you know, there are days where you feel like you're just a jumble of issues. Maybe I shouldn't speak for you. There are days when I feel that I'm just a jumble of issues. But that space that you're talking about, where you can recognize that there are issues that affect us, that we're anxious, that we need to feel in control. But in the core of our being, that's not who I really am. You know, that awakening that I'm talking about, that presence that I'm talking about, that's the freedom from all of it. So Vortex Healing gives you tools to deal with the stuff, but the freedom is always there. And I think that's the important thing to remember about awakening, that it doesn't, Vortex Healing, or no path, I should say, gives you something you don't already have. It clears the decks in a sense so that you can realize what you have always been. And so anything
Nicely
that will
said.
bring you back to being present and in the moment, it's not just going to help with anxiety, it's going to help with issues across the board.
Right.
And this whole, the body, the human energy system, everything, this whole package, it's not just a machine, it's really an experiential workshop. It's really a way for, I'll say, the divine to experience itself in separation and then to bring itself back out again, which is the awakening process. So in a way, we are designed for an experience of separation. You know what I mean? And so the problem is when we identify with our issues and that experience of separation, we suffer. And that's where the suffering comes from. It comes from the identity with our issues, not just the issue itself. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It's a little complicated for
Yeah.
a new person to kind of grasp, but I think I've got it.
Well, I don't doubt that you do, but the anxiety, you know, in the moment, if there's danger, the body needs to react. You know, you need a hit of adrenaline to jump out of the way of that car that's coming at you. You need to be able to move. You need to be, there's nothing wrong with that. That's not an issue. That's the physical body that's hardwired to survive. But I think what's happening more and more today is we are confusing what a survival issue is. And that same stress adrenaline rush carries over to the moments that we're sitting quietly, checking our Facebook account, worrying about what's going to happen. And that same level, that same identification is happening, and that's the anxiety that
That's
I'm talking
right.
about.
I'm glad you clarified that, because that's right. It's the anxiety about whatever, I am not anxiety, but I am feeling anxious when I look at my
That's right.
checkbook.
Perfect,
And as
yeah.
you were saying, perfect, because when we can say, I am feeling anxiety, that's I'm not claiming, I'm not identifying, I am lost in it.
Right.
I am experiencing it. That means there's a part of us that's beginning to observe.
Right.
Right.
And that's the space you're being able to make, that space between I am anxious and I have anxiety that's affecting me. So there's already room to work on it as an issue. And then we
Right.
bring our tools to it, recognize it for what it was, which is why I wanted to do the issue series, to talk about what
So
it is.
we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back with Lorraine and Masha talking about anxiety. Stay with us. For more information, check out our website, www.onenessandwellness.com. Thank you. Look forward to hearing us and watch our show.
If you'd like more information about Vortex Healing, you can go to my website, LorraineGoldblum.com, or Vortex Healing in general, you can go to vortexhealing.org, where you can get more information on other teachers, as Vortex Healing is taught all over the world.
We're back with the second part of our first show with Lorraine and Masha, and we're talking about anxiety. And I've asked Lorraine if she would share something from her own life where we said there's the spectrum of, you're anxious in the moment and you might get over that and the body isn't too affected by it. And then we moved to panic, which is really very serious. And we're finding out that lots of people have panic attacks.
Lots of people have panic attacks, and me included. And it snuck up on me. And I never really, anxiety has always been kind of a thing. We joke about how I'm a Virgo and I'm the, warrior, as it were. But I have to say, it's in perimenopause. Can we go there? Can we go there? Let's go there. Let's go there. Sorry, cameraman. We're going there. My anxiety just really manifested in a way it never had before, and I've come to understand this is a very, very common experience. And I remember sitting in, it wasn't my class, it was someone else's class, and I remember sitting there and I was just working on an issue and then suddenly I just had this experience of doom, and the heart started to beat, and I just physically just kind of lost control. I got very sort of emotional, and it scared me. So the body had a reaction, and then I had an emotional reaction to my reaction. And I saw how quickly it spiraled. And when we took a break, I just sort of put my sunglasses on and excused myself from the room. And I remember saying to a friend of mine, a fellow teacher, I said, can you come meet me in my room in a few minutes? I think I'm having a panic attack. And she laughed. She's like, she had and sure enough, when she came to my room, she saw. And she did some vortex healing on me, and she was very gifted. But the thing I remember, aside from the tools that she offered, was just her willingness to be present with me in that moment, and allowed me to just have my experience, bring love to it, bring the energy consciousness tools with it, and she just allowed me to be vulnerable in that moment, and it moved through very quickly once I had that. But my resistance to that moment, my fear of that moment and what it meant going forward, really, it took me far out very quickly. It was very unnerving. And this is not an uncommon experience.
It's not unusual. As I said, I've heard people say that they haven't been able to leave their houses. They didn't have the opportunity to be with someone who understood and was able to do some healing with you. And that was immediate. So, you were very fortunate in having that happen.
I was, and I want to make it clear that this is a physical issue as well. I think part of the stigma about it is we believe that, I should be able to manage this. I should get control over this. But the body reacts. Another instance that wasn't a panic attack, but I remember it was a perfect moment on paper. I was walking in the woods with my handsome husband. Snow was falling. Bambi and Thumper were playing. No, it was this beautiful moment. And yet my stomach was in knots because I suspected hormonal stuff that played on other issues and things that I were worried about. And this is how the physical, the emotional, psychological, all of these things support our issues. And I'm thinking, well, this is ridiculous. Here's a perfect moment and I'm not in it because I'm having this issue pull me out of it. And again, with a willingness to be present with my tools, with my breath, I was able to come back. But that's where I realized, I really need to sit down and take this through my protocol and look hard at this, because it's not allowing me this beautiful moment.
And it takes away your freedom.
That's right.
For sure.
Yeah.
So people feel trapped.
Or on a runaway freight train.
Yeah.
Because that for me is an expression, and I think it's pretty common. You're sitting somewhere and all of a sudden you're going really quickly somewhere where you don't want to go.
Yeah.
And, that's when we were talking about the sympathetic fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
When we live there with tremendous amount of anxiety or worry or concern, and don't have tools to go back into that rest and repair and let me bring balance into my system. When we're overwhelmed, our body really talks to us.
Yeah.
Very loudly.
Yeah.
And we can be worried about that, or we can really honor the wisdom and say, ooh, we better have a conversation here.
Yeah. And address it as it needs to be addressed. And, you know, sometimes for me, I could feel the physical anxiety arose, and then it looked for a target. Like I felt this way, and then I had to justify it. So I sort of went through my list of things that I can worry about and assign. But part of it was really just physical. And then there's the other part where that the stressor trigger, the emotional or the psychological stress, is bad enough to trigger the physical. It can start one place or the other, but they do feed on each other. So however one addresses it, you have to get it on all levels to be effective.
Right. Well, I think so many people, talking to people, so many people are feeling overwhelmed
Oh, yeah.
all the time. There's so many issues, and they're overwhelmed, whether it's with children and, you know, all that, whatever comes with children.
Yeah.
And then as they get to be teenagers and whatever comes with teenagers.
Yeah.
And, you know, so life becomes a drag.
And we live in a different world today. I've been sort of researching how social media and technology has really changed the game.
Absolutely.
I remember the day when I started to be able to get my emails on my cell phone. That was beautiful at first. I was like, oh, this is going to save me so much time, and I can address my emails on the train ride home. But I quickly realized that I was kind of addicted to that and expected myself to be continuously available to the world. And that, for me, created a lot of anxiety, and I think it does for a lot of people.
I think you're right. Social media, I think we love the new technology, all the changes, and yet it's really become, I feel like sometimes I'm a slave. I said, no, I'm not taking my cell phone. I can just leave it.
Yeah.
You know, put it aside. I'm not going to begin the day with looking at emails. I'm going to begin the day with meditation and mindfulness and my prayers, and that's it.
Yeah.
But it takes, you have to really...
You have to create a kind of discipline about
absolutely.
it, because it's addictive.
Absolutely.
It's addictive, isn't it? And,
Very addictive.
You know, and also just with everything that's going on in the world, you know, the natural thing is, wait, you haven't heard what happened in the news? You haven't heard? News travels so fast, everything's instantaneous.
Right.
And there's this feeling like, well, you have to know what's happening and you have to be available. And you don't, actually. You can create a structure that works for you and your own boundaries, but it's very tempting
to move away from the boundaries. But I think
yeah.
it's so healthy to have those boundaries. I'll go get some bubbles and blow bubbles, you know, walk down the street
Yeah.
and blow bubbles. Something that relaxes you
Yeah.
and keeps you away from all that stress.
Yeah.
One of the definitions that I love about addiction, and that to me is also when we get caught up in certain emotions,
Yeah.
is that we're externally oriented. There's nobody existing here. You know, I'm worried about what you think. I'm worried about what the expectations here. This person doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So that's social media keeps you out there. Everything keeps you out there. And what are we missing? Well, we're missing ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we don't think about ourselves. But what would we do normally by ourselves? Would we take a walk in nature?
Yeah.
Will we be with social friends we haven't seen in ages? Things that actually feed us.
Yeah.
Things that bring in balance into ourselves. But you know, the word addiction is very powerful, and we can be addicted to our
Gadgets.
our emotions, anxiety.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
You know, this is the way I have to deal with my day. Because did you see the headlines?
Yeah.
Drop the headlines, guys.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to be ending this session shortly, and we're going to come back with part 2, you know, dealing with anxiety and talking about some of the ways that we might cope with anxiety. So we thank you for being with us, Lorraine and Masha. Thank you for viewing. Stay tuned for the second part of anxiety. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste.